Welcome to the Minor Consult, where I speak with leaders shaping our world in diverse ways. Continuing our focus on AI today, I'm excited to welcome two colleagues from Stanford Medicine who are joining me in the studio in person to discuss AI in clinical care. Dr. Michael Pfeffer is the Chief Information and Digital Officer and Associate Dean of Technology and Digital Solutions at Stanford Medicine. And Dr. Nigam Shah is the Chief Data Scientist and Associate Dean for Research at Stanford Medicine. Together, they lead our adult healthcare delivery systems efforts to integrate AI into patient care, medical research, and administrative services. Mike and Nigam, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Lloyd. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful to be here.
Great. Well, let's start out. I always like to learn something about our guests in the beginning. And Nigam, maybe you could tell us about your background. And first, I just have to say what a privilege and pleasure it is to work with both of you. And certainly the thing that I love the most about my job, and I love a lot of things about my job, but the thing I love the most is working with amazing colleagues. And the two of you are absolutely that. So Nigam, can you tell us about your background and how you came to the interests you have today and the work you're doing today?
Absolutely. So I grew up in India, spent a few years in Africa, finished med school, and I was going to be an orthopedic surgeon. And we have a family friend who got his PhD in the US in the 70s, and he convinced me to try my hand at research. And said, if you don't like it, you can come back and still be the carpenter that you want to be. And I was like, all right, he has a point. So I applied, and I picked the usual things like molecular medicine, pharmacology, things I knew from med school. And when I joined at Penn State, that was the year the Human Genome Project came out. Front page of Science, Cell, New York Times, Time Magazine, and just this idea of using computers to understand biology, like I was hooked. I didn't even know how to type back then, which is and by sheer interest, I lobbied my graduate program to let me switch into a bioinformatics major. And then one thing after the other, ended up doing a dissertation, building a reasoning engine, but had to do it for yeast because Penn State's med school is 80 miles away in Hershey, and I was on the main campus.
Right.
And after that, people said, doctors who do AI go to Stanford, so you should go there. And never left.
Certainly glad that you have stayed here and that you're doing so many amazing things. Mike, can you tell us about your background and your path to coming to us here a few years ago to be our CIO and Associate Dean?
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, this journey. Started way back when I was 5, and I remember sitting down at a Texas Instrument computer with my grandfather, who was an electrical engineer and had a little company, and he taught me how to program in BASIC. And so I wrote like a tiny little program that would do math equations. So it would ask me a math equation, and then I would enter it. And so I just fell in love with technology, the potential to create with it, and then kind of wanted to follow in my grandfather's footsteps, so went to college and became chemical engineering. But during that, I became a patient, and it really opened up my eyes to just how important medicine and health is for everything we do. And I wanted to take kind of what I learned in engineering and process and design and pivot to medicine. So I ended up going to medical school and didn't know what I wanted to do. Probably wanted to be everything. Thought I wanted to be a surgeon. Ended up doing internal medicine, which is completely the opposite. But throughout my journey, I always saw opportunities for how could we do things a little bit better. And when I was at UCLA, where I did my residency, and they were on paper, and they wanted to, move into the electronic world, and I threw my hat in the ring. And it's funny because they posted these jobs, which we've never heard of, these physician informaticist jobs. This was way back when. And there were 3 of them. They were part-time. And 3 people applied. I was one of them. So my odds were really good at getting one of these positions. And that really became my entrance into informatics. And it's been an amazing journey to see how far we've come over the years. And couldn't have been happier to land here at Stanford right when things were transforming right before our eyes in technology.
Well, and you and your team certainly played a major role and continue to play a major role in making sure that transformation occurs. Nigam, one of the things you did early in your career here, and it's grown so much since its inception, is you developed a service called Green Button. Would you describe, first of all, what was the motivation? How did you get the idea for Green Button? How did you build it? And where is it going from here?
Would love to. So Green Button is sort of one of those wonderful, uniquely Stanford stories. The first time a physician tried to use the data on prior patients using a computer to estimate prognosis and treatment plans was in 1972. Dr. Alvin Feinstein, who everybody knows. And then after that, the Duke University had a project, and our former chair of medicine trained there. They did it for cardiology. And then on our own campus in pediatrics, Dr. Jenny Frankovich had used our original research data warehouse to improve care of a patient. And when I joined the faculty, like all of this rich history swirling around, we had digitized by then, EHRs had been around, we went on Epic in about 2007 or so. And I was like, what should we be doing here? And it sounded obvious that we should be looking at the past experiences and outcomes of the patient we have cared for, patients we have cared for, in order to inform the care of the next one. I mean, that is what physician experience is about. And EHRs are this repository of the collective experience, but we never go back to them. We rely on our memory. So we started, spitballing and came up with the idea, wouldn't it be nice to have a button in the EHR that if we clicked it, it would suddenly summarize the evidence? And that's where the Green Button idea comes from. We wanted a button. Blue was taken. You can't have red.
Right. That's for sure.
And then evidence makes things clear. So ideally, it would be the clear button. But as any computer person knows, if you press clear, it deletes your screen. So nobody would press it. And so you can't have black, you can't have red, you can't have brown. So that's fine. Green button. And then as we started building it, it evolved into this idea of actually being a service, a consultation service. And the intuition behind that was whenever something sufficiently complex comes in medicine, a new specialty takes care of it. Like we don't have our primary care physicians doing their own blood smears, which when I trained we did. Or interpreting their own MRIs and so on. Radiology does that, and pathology does the other tests. So we envisioned it as a clinical informatics consultation, because the specialty of clinical informatics that Mike was just referring to had become real. It had matured.
Right.
And so we staffed and ran the first service in the country, perhaps in the world, where for a period of 1.5 years, any physician could call us, describe their case, and by hand, soup to nuts, we would create a report of what happened to similar patients based on the millions of records in our data warehouse. And then we wrote up a paper like any professor would.
Sure.
And that's how that consultation service, based on about 100 cases, proved the feasibility of using aggregate data at the bedside.
Right. One final question maybe on Green Button. So Nigam, starting out as you described, there was a lot of human capital put into those reports because you got the data back from the healthcare records in our system, but then you had experts carefully review it and curate it in a form that someone can easily understand it and make clinical decisions based upon it. How has that cycle changed now that, first of all, you have access to more records than you did before, and large language models are much more sophisticated than they were even a year ago? How much human capital is there now in generating one of those reports compared to, say, when you first started Green Button?
That is a wonderful question. It'll allow me to give a concrete sort of numbers here. So the first time we did this, absolute first time, we didn't have even the informatics consult service. It took us about 9 months, soup to nuts. Getting the data, making sure it's clean, mapping it to the right ontologies, creating the cohorts, doing the math. And then systematically, we looked at each and every step and said, what part of it can be automated?
Right.
And automated in a way that we can still maintain the human checks and balances. And so we shrunk that 9 months down to a day on our campus. That's a 137-fold increase. But still, translating the question and the question behind the question into something that a computer understands, that was still manual. Now, with the advent of large language models, given that we've done thousands of these by now, the way we need to describe patients who have diabetes, there's variation obviously, but there's 5 or 6 ways in which we do that. And all of those have been done by now, manually, once at least. So we have this library of phenotypes.
Right.
And so now we can have this language model that's available 24/7. And if you say, I need to look at patients of Asian origin who have diabetes, did not respond to metformin, it can translate all of those questions and that English into a query that would run as SQL on the back-end system without human intervention.
Okay.
A human still looks at the actual query before you press hit and submit. So we don't automate the key aspects, which is this question well formed? That's still human.
Okay.
But going from English to the question can be automated. The analysis runs, and when you get all of those plots and so on, assembling that into a report used to be manual, and now a language model can do that. But the human still reads it, says, yes, I agree, and signs their name to it.
Okay. That's really helpful. And Mike, in addition to being a technology and software expert, you're a practicing physician.
Yes.
And how has your training, your real world experience in delivering care, and you still attend on services at our adult hospital, how has that informed your deployment of technology, your evaluation of technology, and your contributions to the evolution of patient and physician-facing technology?
Yeah, thanks. It's a great question. I mean, I love my time on service, taking care of patients, working with the medical students, the residents, and getting everybody excited about what the potential is. For me, it's always been about simplicity and usability. I have seen over the years this kind of conversion from the analog world to really digitizing all the processes we've done, but that doesn't mean they're simple and usable. And layer on top of that all our needs for data privacy and security, and it's been very complex and sometimes very hard to use and not as simple as we would like it. So getting to use the technologies when I'm seeing patients really has helped me translate to our technology professionals, vendors in the market, et cetera, like how do we do this better? How do we think about the user experience, not only the clinician experience, but the patient experience as we kind of design and think about the technologies. And it hasn't been great in the beginning, but I think we've come a long way because more and more clinicians are getting involved in the technology aspect of healthcare delivery. And as Nigam mentioned with the Clinical Informatics Fellowship, Stanford actually being the first, I mean, it's expanded incredibly, and we're training clinicians who deeply understand not only the research aspects of informatics, but also clinical informatics. How do you scale? How do you deploy? What's the user experience? So it's really grounded me in the sense of, if you create a tip sheet with 35 steps on it and you hand it to a physician and say, this is how you're going to, do a consent form, it's not going to happen. It's 35 steps. And so everything we need to do as technologists in healthcare is make it simple and usable, and the rest just falls into place.
You described that we've been on this evolutionary journey, and you also mentioned that when you first joined UCLA, that you're still on paper. And of course now, thanks to a variety of initiatives more than a decade ago, pretty much all health systems today are electronic, at least in their backbone.
For sure.
But early on, a lot of those systems were electronic filing cabinets. And as has been talked about many, many times, the documentation burden associated with the systems definitely increased the after-hours time for practicing physicians, and has been cited in various different avenues as being a contributor to burnout.
Yes.
Now we're on the cusp of another wave of innovation. By the way, I don't think that any of us, even those of us who've been really concerned about the documentation burden, none of us would want to go back to where we were before, where
Very true.
we charts got lost, images could never be found, and getting records from one place to the next was much harder than it is today. But as you described, we're still on this journey,
Yes.
and of course, thanks to the two of you and your colleagues, we at Stanford have really been focused on making sure we're a leader in a responsible way on that journey. Maybe, Mike, start with you, and then Nigam. What are some of the technologies that either are being deployed today or that you anticipate will be deployed in the near future that are going to improve the quality of healthcare, access to healthcare, and reduce the the workload and the burden on all practitioners, physicians, nurses, everyone involved in the delivery experience?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's such an exciting time now because kind of the dreams that we had are starting to come true. And so I'll give you an example. Documentation burden. We have forever been trying to figure out how to listen to a conversation and create a note. And there have been so many iterations of that with people on the back end and glasses videotaping what's going on and people transcribing things and using early natural language processing to kind of piece together a note. But it was slow, it was expensive, it never scaled. And that's really such an important piece of healthcare technologies. It's got to scale. But with the advent of large language models, we have been able to really see the ability of technology to listen to that encounter between the clinician and the patient, and at the end of it, write a note. And that's just been remarkable. We were the first actually at Stanford Medicine to pilot that technology embedded into the electronic health record and show that it was incredibly successful. Not only did it work within the way our clinicians practice, within the platforms, that they don't have to jump outside to a different solution, but it gave back that ability to have that connection with the patient, because you can have a conversation, you're not sitting there typing. And so that pilot was successful, and as good faculty, we're trying to publish it, the results, but we didn't need to wait for that. And so we have now begun scaling that technology, the ambient AI scribe technology, across all of Stanford. And it's really been amazing. We have hundreds of doctors on it now, and the technology keeps getting better, the notes keep getting better, and the ability for it to do things like personalize how you like your note to appear, and ultimately in taking kind of the encounter and teeing up orders that you may have talked about in the encounter is coming. So this ability to really bring back the fun of the interaction with the patient and reduce the need to write a note is remarkable. We're seeing it. It is real, finally. And the other thing I think is really neat, we spent all this time going from the analog world and digitizing it, which really wasn't about changing processes or writing notes differently or anything, but getting all that stuff in the electronic health record so that we could do, data analytics and the Green Button project. But if we can capture in real time directly from the patient the history, it's going to be better than what was typed 12 hours later.
Sure.
And so the data is going to get better. And if the small data gets better, that becomes even better big data. And so we're going to learn more and more and more about our patients and how to care for people through these technologies that automate kind of these processes that have always been so burdensome.
Thank you. And Nigam, of course, you're a pioneer, you're an innovator. You came up with the concept of Green Button even before you had the technology backbone that you have today, and then you've wisely incorporated that technology backbone to take it to a whole new level of impact. What excites you about the next 5 to 10 years in terms of how we improve the care we deliver, how we integrate various sources of information to make our care more efficient, effective, safe, and compassionate? but you've always been a person to think not just about today, but where we can be 5 to 10 years from now. And what are you thinking about now in terms of a vision 5 to 10 years from now?
Yeah, so two things. First, if what Mike just described works, as physicians get detailed, longer notes, the size of the medical record, which today is already about the size of the Great Gatsby in the case of complex patients, is going to get bigger. Mm-hmm. So how are we going to summarize it for human consumption? Mm-hmm. And one of the things, like if you ask physicians what do they want tech to do for them, the first thing is like, write this stuff for me. Mm-hmm. But the second thing is, can you summarize everything that's happened so that I'm ready when the patient comes in? So we're working to build an application which we jokingly call Chat EHR or Chatter, mm-hmm. where the idea is that given a patient's medical record, can we feed it all into the memory of a large language model? And then you can have a conversation with it. You can say, summarize the last few lab tests. When was this particular procedure done? If the patient had a stroke, what were the neurological deficits? So it's in testing phase right now. A few physicians have gotten their hands on it with test data. And so that's, I would say, in the 1 to 2 year horizon. Mm-hmm. Maybe we can overlay voice on it. So you just like you spoke with the patient and it became a record, you now talk to the record saying, Mr. Jones is coming tomorrow, summarize the last 5 visits and the 3 most important things that happened. And then if we look further out, if all of these things come to pass, the amount of labor needed to do technology right, keep it safe, keep it reliable, keep it equitable, will go much higher. So one of our faculty members has this interesting statistic that has me scared, which is that in order to build a simple predictor with just 4 variables and do impeccable academic validation, 4 sites, external validity, all that, took them $27.7 million in 10 years. If we have that kind of cost to build, test, and adopt technology, we can't afford it. Yeah. So the 5 to 7 year thing is, how do we make it so that we can do these things, transcription, search, predictive models, mm-hmm. test them, deploy them, and figure out the delivery science for it so that we can do it cost effectively.
Right, right. I think the 3 of us, and probably most of our colleagues we work with, see the transformative potential mm-hmm. for AI, for technology, in the way we deliver healthcare. And indeed, in the case of the 2 of you and your colleagues, you're actually contributing to that deployment and development. But there is a lot of skepticism out there mm-hmm. About AI in general, but in particular AI among members of the public when it gets applied to something as sensitive, as personal, as health information and the health record. And there was a poll done by the Pew Charitable Trust last year that showed the vast majority of Americans expressed deep skepticism about AI, under AI applications to their health care data. Mm-hmm. And of course, I think one of the things that all of us need to do, and one of the things we're focused on our initiatives here, such as with Raise Health, Responsible AI for Safe and Equitable Health, is how do we communicate what the opportunities of AI, and even more importantly, how do we place guardrails around the pitfalls and potential dangers of AI? Mike, maybe starting with you, but then going to you, Nigam, what do you see, what concerns you the most about the applications of AI and technology, or doesn't even have to be AI, technology in general, as it applies to healthcare? Because today, already, we are dependent upon technology. For sure. Mike, you and I were chatting before, and maybe you can describe some of the enormous steps that you and your colleagues put in place to make sure that our core technology backbone that runs our health system is protected, secure, redundant, so that we don't lose it at any time of any minute of any day of the week. But maybe risks that you're concerned about, that you're focused on, and how you're mitigating those risks.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that if we fast forward, the question is going to flip on its head, and it's going to be, why aren't you using AI? That I think we're going to see that our patients and communities demand it. But to get to that point, it's going to really be based on trust and transparency. So what are we doing with the data? How are we protecting it? How is it secure? Data privacy, and then that transparency to the patient, which we've done really, really amazing things with patient portals, open notes, lab tests come back basically instantaneously. So really getting all of that data out to patients has really been the start of the transparency that we need to do for AI as well. I mean, just a few months ago, we've launched on our patient portal that you can download your entire MRI image, for example, after the report is done. Mm-hmm. So right on your phone, you can scroll through your MRI. That's never happened before. So really opening up that transparency and trust is going to be key for everybody to feel comfortable with it. I think, we look at AI on a risk-based level, and there are some low-risk things that involve humans in the loop. So when we talk about AI scribes and ambient listening for note generation, a physician reads the note or clinician reads the note, edits it, and signs it. We have ways where we draft a response to a patient message in from our portal and our in-basket. And again, there's a human in the loop. So you start with a draft and you have to read it, edit it, and send it. So we're not actually connecting AI directly to patients where, say, you're interacting with a bot directly. That will probably come one day, but we have to make it very clear who or what you're interacting with. That's going to be really key for trust and transparency. So low-risk applications, automating the revenue cycle, for example.
Yeah. Sure.
That's such a huge opportunity that I think we will solve in the next few years. And again, give physicians back and clinicians back all that time for coding and billing and all of those things, which really we will be able to automate. And then as we get to the more high-risk things like prediction and clinical decision support, we have to, as Nigam mentioned, we have to figure out how to test and validate and monitor these things and get better and better at it because while we could do a few models, 10 models, 50 models, when you're talking about hundreds of models,
sure,
that's going to require other models to help us do that. And then two other things I think in terms of risks is sustainability. This requires a lot of compute and power and energy. And if we scale that across all of healthcare, that's a lot of environmental cost. And so how do we do these things with smaller models, more local models, more sustainable models? So we have to figure that out. We can't do everything with a large language model. That's not going to be scalable or sustainable. So that's something that's really important. And then, as part of RAISE, one of the key words is equitable. And so you can't have one health system having all of these great algorithms and the one down the street not. So we have to figure out how we all work together as a community in healthcare delivery so that all get to take advantage of what will be, I think, ultimately necessary to deliver care. We were talking before there. I asked ChatGPT how many medical articles are published every day. Mm-hmm. It's 4,000, say, on the lower end. And then if you even look at a specialty specific, you're talking 400 or so articles a day. There's no way anybody can read all this and keep up with it. We're going to need these technologies to be able to deliver evidence-based care. And so we need to make sure everybody has access to that, not just certain sites.
Great. Nigam, your thoughts about things you're concerned about and what you're doing and you and your colleagues are doing to address those concerns.
So I group things into two buckets. One is what we're just chatting about, which is how do we control the complexity cost of all of this? Because as we add more things, still 24-hour day, and the FDA approval processes take whatever they take, and we have to be very intentional about managing complexity. The second big thing is shaping the adoption in the manner that it's equitable, sustainable, as Mike was saying, affordable. And so, for example, concretely, producing about 100 words on GPT-4, if you're in Texas, is about a bottle of water. If you're in Washington, it's 3 bottles of water. That's a pretty big environmental impact. Now, if we want a model, a language model, to say transcribe conversation or respond to a patient message, that's a very narrow set of tasks. We probably don't need GPT-4 for that. I like to use a transportation analogy. Like if you need to go from San Jose to San Francisco, like we don't really need a Boeing 747. Like driving is a viable alternative. And so I think we need to adopt that kind of thinking, bring in sustainability on day one before both the complexity and the operating cost get too high.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. I think it's also useful for to mention to our listeners that some things we take for granted now, for example, just because of the electronic health record system we have today, we dramatically reduced medication errors compared to when we were on pen and paper, and when a decimal point got moved and catastrophic results. And that just doesn't happen in the era of where dosages get checked electronically, algorithmically, based on weight and a number of other characteristics. So we're already seeing the benefits and improvement in quality, but there's certainly the pitfalls we have to guard against. Yeah.
And all of this conversation, like we're focused on our care delivery mission.
Right.
But we have an education mission.
For sure.
And we have a research mission. And on there, the challenges are different and the opportunities are different. So on the education mission, what are we going to teach our physicians about AI? And how will we use AI in the education process itself? Going back to those 4,000 papers,
Right.
It used to be sort of a rite of passage to do a systematic review. You read 400 papers and you write something up. Now we'll need to do a systematic review every day.
Right.
Right.
And so can we create computer systems that create live automated systematic reviews? Can we create USMLE exam questions
Right.
Generated by a model based on the area in which a student is not as strong in, instead of having to have physicians write those questions? And on the research front, hypothesis generation, protein structures, small molecules, binding affinities, all of that used to take months or years is now compressed to a day.
Right.
Which means we might run out of people to do clinical trials. And so we're going to have to rethink a research enterprise in terms of how are we doing things so that we can have enough throughput of all of these new ideas and wed them in a manner that's safe and worthy of porting back to our clinical mission.
What are some of the ways that you think AI is going to help make healthcare more equitable and accessible? Maybe examples today, of which we're beginning to see many, but in the future, because that's certainly a goal I know the two of you embrace, and all of us here, and from the concept of Raise Health to the focus we have across the board on health equity, that is using the knowledge, the skills, the innovation that you and so many others pioneer and then deploy, typically first here, but then how does that have the potential, and we hope the reality, of really making healthcare delivery much more equitable and accessible than it is today? Nigam, do you want to start, and then Mike? Yeah.
So I use the analogy of the pharmaceutical industry. There's a drug that's invented, and after a few years, it becomes a generic. And when it becomes a generic, it's cheap, and everybody can use it. What is our pathway for making AI innovations go generic? I don't think we think about it that way yet as a field, as a community. But let's say we figured out how to make an accurate enough diagnosis bot.
Yep.
What is our pathway to say, all right, now we're going to evaluate it, use it, we figured out it works in our system, but we give it to everybody, as you often point out, invented here and used, everywhere by billions. What are the technical frameworks for that? What are the legal frameworks for that? What are the economic models? All of that needs to be figured out. But we have to figure that out to make AI scalable so that it can become equitable.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
and totally agree. And I think like one of the things that we're working on is multilingual support for, say, our patient portal, My Health. You know, most of the time you can change the wording of a button, you know, but it's so much more than that. It's translating all of the reports and labs and notes and everything into the language that the patients prefer.
Sure.
And so you can imagine in the past that would require an enormous amount of work and actually not possible. But now with large language models, we're really testing that and experimenting with that and planning to release a multilingual My Health in the near future. And the whole thing would be in the preferred language of the patient. So we want to start with a few languages and test that and then move forward. But you know, there's so much opportunity in that space. And there's it's just a great partnership with our patient experience team to really think about how do you do this in a safe and equitable way. But I think multilingual support is a great example of things that we will be able to do because of AI that we couldn't do in the past.
Another great
Yeah.
example is from our children's hospital, where in the management of type 1 diabetes patients, they've figured out the use of an internet-connected insulin pump and a text messaging system that essentially keeps an eye on what the patient's levels are and what range they're fluctuating in. And turns out that by doing that, you can get to control much faster. In the adult side, there was a project out of the Masters in Clinical Information Management program where they used a voice interface for type 2 diabetes patients to titrate their drug levels and insulin levels. And turns out time to control went down from 8 to 9 weeks to 3 to 4 weeks. And so these are great advances.
Sure.
How do we then package them
Right.
and then give them away?
Yeah.
Or at least distribute them at scale? Because I think without scale, we're not going to get to the massive improvement in healthcare that we envision using AI.
Fantastic. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. I'd like to close with two questions that I'd like to ask each of my guests. The first is, what are the most important qualities for a leader in AI healthcare biomedicine today in order to responsibly and effectively lead in this space? Mike, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, there's so many qualities, so many different kinds of leaders. I think it's the leader who understands it's we and not I. The team is just so important in making all of this happen, and really nurturing and building a great team of people is, I think, the key to success here. It's not going to be one person, and it's not going to be even one small group of people within a larger ecosystem. It's really going to be everybody. And so I just think that's really so important, and not just in AI and technology, but in healthcare in general. Everything we do is team-based, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, when I round on patients with my team, I try to make it very clear we're a team. I may be the attending, but we're all in this together. You know, we're all part of this team, and if we act like a team, we're going to take better care of the patient. And I think that kind of leadership is going to be needed to make AI really successful in healthcare.
Great.
So I was going to say team. And Mike actually lives the team and the we part, that I can attest to. I think one of the ones that's going to be increasingly important is having a strong sense of direction.
Okay.
Moral, ethical, whatever we want to call it. There's so many distractions today, from technology, from other things, other walks of life. And having a leader who can point the way and have that compass not shift every 2 minutes, I think is going to be crucially important, because then the team knows where to go.
Great. And final question, what gives you hope for the future? Nigam, do you want to start?
It's the students. I spend a lot of my time teaching, and it is just fabulous to be a professor where you can have people half your age or your kid's age and call them colleagues. But the questions they ask, the way they approach problems, the absence of assumptions and priors is just refreshing.
Absolutely.
I think we're in good hands.
I agree. Mike?
I mean, I agree with the students too. I would also just say the potential to really treat each patient individually is coming.
Yeah.
And I think this precision health at scale idea, where we really can begin to deeply understand all aspects of the patient, whether it's genomic information, environmental, and bring that together and start to deliver personalized kind of decision support, is going to be game changing. And I just have tremendous hope that we are going to get there now because of these technologies.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, both of you, each of you. It's just such a pleasure, privilege to work with you on a regular basis in our day jobs, and it's been wonderful chatting with you here today.
Thank you, Lloyd.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening to the Minor Consult with me, Stanford School of Medicine Dean Lloyd Minor. I hope you enjoyed today's discussion with two of my Stanford Medicine colleagues, Dr. Michael Pfeffer, Chief Information and Digital Officer at Stanford Health Care and the Stanford School of Medicine, and Dr. Nigam Shah, the Health Systems Chief Data Scientist. Please send your questions by email to the Minor Consult at theminorconsult.com, and check out our website, theminorconsult.com, for updates, episodes, and more. To get the latest episodes of the Minor Consult, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please rate the podcast 5 stars. Your feedback helps make this podcast happen. Thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to our next episode. Until then, stay safe, stay well, and be kind.